Who's watching the game? The global fight against manipulation and harm in sports betting.
Thanks for joining this panel discussion. We're going to discuss sports. Well, not actually sports, but I think it's very important to discuss and address integrity matters, which is a very important subject in sports. You know the title of this panel discussion? Who's watching the game? The global fight against manipulation and harm in sport betting. It's quite a vast subject, so we really need to hit the ground running. So we start by introducing our panel of experts, which I'm pleased to know from my experience in the sports media. Kevin Azzopardi in the middle. I know this is going to be a bit of confusing because we have two Kevin Azzopardis in the panel. I am the sports media guy. Kevin is the Secretary General of the Maltese Olympic Committee. Herman Mula, Integrity Officer and Manager Legal Services of the Malta Football Association, and Antonio Abdillah Zarafa, Project-Based Consultant of the International Betting Integrity Association. I hope I got that right because it was quite complicated. So let's kick off. I'll start with you, Herman. How do the Maltese laws and sport regulations address the problem of manipulation in sports? And what is really being done in terms of collaboration between different stakeholders to try and step it up even further?
Well, your question, Kevin, if I can take it short, it will be a bit difficult. But let's start with the regulations and legal aspect. With regards to laws here in Malta, we are quite advanced when compared to other countries. In fact, our legislation, which is a law quite novel, it was enacted in 2018, which treats match manipulation in general in Malta, not only in football, because I come from football, but it treats all sports. In fact, Kevin can explain very well, who is much involved from the aspect of holistic aspect with regards to sport, but he will explain better. Basically, it's quite, they call it draconian, but it's very, very, it carries heavy punishments. And it carries heavy punishments. There is mandatory imprisonment, for example, which is not so common when it comes to criminal sanctioning in other countries. But here in Malta, we felt the need in the past 10 years to legislate in this manner because we had some cases with regards to corruption, particularly in football, which raised a lot of eyebrows. So basically, this is the background, legislative background, how it evolved during the past years. And with regards to stakeholders, I am proud to say that there is both an official and also an unofficial, very good relationship between all stakeholders. I can mention my colleague, who is coming from the Olympic Committee, other people who are involved in the betting authorities themselves, the gaming regulator themselves, who are not present on this panel, but they are very much involved, and also another regulator which was newly set up in the previous years, which is AIMS, which, in my opinion, is the regulator which is going to keep us, all the stakeholders, within this good relationship.
Kevin, Herman gave us an extensive overview of this situation, the reality in Malta, and how the stakeholders are collaborating, and the legal and legislative aspect. But we always say and we always preach that any fight against irregularities, against illegalities, must start with awareness and education. What are the programs and educational tools available to stakeholders, be them players, administrators, coaches, officials, to respond, recognize, and tackle manipulation in sports.
I fully agree with you, Kevin, that of course education lies at the crux of any initiative to be taken. As a Maltese Olympic Committee, we have the responsibility today to cater for no less than 45 national sporting federations. And of course, we continuously harp on the importance of the national federations not just investing their time, their energy, their money into the technical aspects, into the administrative aspects, which of course are crucial and very important, but likewise, the same investment must be poured into the regulatory aspect. And as my colleague Herman just said, from the perspective of the Malta FA, there is a very robust legislative body internally with the FA, and it's certainly a prime example to emulate. And in fact, we do have a good number of other national sporting federations who gradually are also finding their feet in this regard to make sure, one, as you mentioned, that the top priority is awareness. Unfortunately, we still encounter circumstances, also us as an Olympic Committee, when we have athletes and officials selected to represent our country abroad in international competitions, that sometimes what to us might seem to be obvious, to them isn't. And I give a very simple example, which whenever we deal with educational programs, we always get athletes, especially the younger ones, who question, but why? And this relates, for example, to posting a simple post on social media that I woke up in the morning and I'm sick or injured. Of course, that is valuable information which should not be leaked publicly, but because of course it may alter the tactics, etc., of opponents, and it could lead to giving outsiders information that they would be looking for. And this is something which, as a Maltese Olympic Committee, we stress upon a lot. It must be said that up to a few years ago, educational programs were only done in the last few weeks leading up to a major international sporting event. Today, as Herman mentioned, together with our colleagues from the Authority for Integrity in Maltese Sport, we are working hand in hand to ensure that things are not done sporadically, one-off, but continuously, in a regular manner, because we firmly believe that the more we preach, even if sometimes it may sound repetitive, it's definitely not a loss, because as we all know, education is paramount. And no matter how much time one invests in education or any type of education, it's definitely never a loss. And especially also with the younger generation, I mean, as a Maltese Olympic Committee, it's no secret that in the last few years we are investing heavily in our younger athletes without alienating our elite athletes. But if we really believe in a great result in 10 years' time, it must start from a young age. And even at that age, we are investing our energies together with the Authority for Integrity in Maltese Sport, where they are also organizing, going into schools, for example, kids aged 12, 13, as part of the Sport Career Development Program. And even from that age, kids get their first taste of what sport integrity is all about. And of course, certain key topics which we believe, together with the personnel from AIMS, which are key to make sure that they are delivered to these students.
Thanks for that detailed explanation, Kevin. Now we'll pass on to Antonio. Good to see you, Antonio. I have known Antonio from his previous roles in the regulatory, mainly aspect of gaming. And to be honest, I was intrigued when I read your designation with this International Betting Integrity Association. So I'm going to ask you from an international betting perspective, how is transactional data used to detect suspicious betting partners, and what are the insights it gives to the integrity networks?
Thank you, Kevin. So first and foremost, it's important to make it clear that transactional data is available for a reason, and that's because online betting operators residing in well-regulated jurisdictions are actually obliged, even at law in most jurisdictions, to actually report suspicious betting to the regulator. So even just with that, automatically they need to have set up teams, they need to have the right mechanisms in place to be able to detect suspicious betting. However, then there's the other obvious reason. So sports betting operators are part of the ecosystem, and they're as much as a loss as all the other parties if an event is fixed. Remember that if an event is fixed, then that means that the betting markets are predictable, and if the betting markets are predictable, that means that the operator is going to be at a loss. So that transactional data, which is very, very detailed, and I can give some examples, is available there for a reason. Now, like you said, I come from the International Betting Integrity Association, where we have over 80 members who are actually pooling in that data into one central association. So that means that when one of our betting operators detects an incident of suspicious betting, that is when they report it. Now, when we say incident of suspicious betting, and this is the level of detail that sports betting operators go into. So obviously betting operators, for a number of reasons, they have mechanisms in play where they can predict what is the average amount of money which will be played on an event, what is what type of customers will be betting on that event, etc. When obviously the operators start detecting glitches or unusual activity, for example, there is perceived that the yellow card market on a specific event will have an average amount of income. If they start seeing a substantial amount of bets coming from a specific player, a specific jurisdiction, etc., that will raise an eyebrow. Now, suspicious bets could be obviously various. It could be either you have a number of individuals coming from the same locality placing specific bets on an event. You could have one specific individual through the KYC, you will notice that he is linked with the event and he's placing unusual amounts of money on a specific market. It could be various. But the beauty of the gaming industry, especially when they are part of an association, of a betting integrity association, is that when one detects an issue, they share it with the others within the remit of the IBA's global monitoring platform. And that is where each and every operator starts to obviously collate that activity. And then we as IBA, we gather the transactional data, as you said, and we share them with our partners. Now, our partners are indeed regulators and sports. So we do share that data with UEFA, with the International Tennis Integrity Agency. If you look at our annual report, just in 2024, for example, 17 athletes or individuals linked to a sport were actually sanctioned.
17 or 17?
17. Were actually sanctioned because an investigation took place where betting data was provided by a betting operator. And that is why, like I said, regulated betting operators do a lot. It's in their interest to do a lot. In certain cases, like I said, it's in their, obviously, a compliance obligation to do that as well. But at the end of the day, that data is actually being used by sports, by law enforcement, by regulators to be able to issue the respective sanctions.
Thanks, Antonio. Again, a very interesting and insightful explanation. Now I'll have a question for all of you, because obviously time is flying fast. Where do challenges remain in coordinating between sports organizations, regulators, and the betting industry, and how can these gaps be effectively closed? Start with you, Herman.
Yeah, maybe I can take and bridge with what Antonio was saying, because it is very crucial and very important what they do, that they bring this information, which is compulsory from betting operators, to give it and flag it to them and then channel it to us for our investigations. But there is another problem, which we were speaking actually, myself and Antonio, behind the scenes about this. There is the unregulated market, which is a big problem, and it is because since we are here in a forum of gaming, for gaming and for the gaming operators, it is stifling their income. Because at the end of the day, they're all businessmen, they are all business operators, so when they invest in integrity, they need to invest in something which gives them something back. So apart from the match fixing, which is on the regulated market, which is match fixing subject to the regulated market, there is another kind of match fixing which we investigate as well, which comes from the unregulated market. And that there is a dark figure there. There is something which cannot actually be monitored. So it is very important that the gaming regulators invest as well in this kind of investigation and intelligence investigation and gathering in order to stifle and collaborate with law enforcement and other national stakeholders in order to stifle, which is something illegal after all. You know, betting in the streets is not legal. So, and it is harming as well the industry, it is harming actually the basics, the basis of integrity which we all uphold. And obviously we have to sell it to make it more interesting for the operators.
Kevin?
Well, in my opinion, from my point of view as a Maltese Olympic Committee, I would have to confess that the greatest challenge is convincing people, convincing stakeholders to understand and appreciate the importance of education. And I will give you a practical example. More than a year ago, we invited over from the International Olympic Committee a key person, director status at IOC on sport integrity. And of course, we extended an invitation to our national federations to attend and also to athletes. And the turnout was very good, but we had a few cases where the administrators themselves contacted us and told us, thank you very much, but as a sport, we have never had any such situations, and so we deem that this is rather irrelevant to us. And to me, that was a red alarm button. Because, first of all, we are all aware that it only happens once, and it gets you off guard, and then you're left with an egg in your face to solve. And of course, such a sentiment, such an attitude set me thinking that, of course, unfortunately, some key administrators are complacent, I would say, when it comes to matters related to sports integrity, or leaving matters up to chance, or believing because they deem, because you can never be sure, they deem that certain attitudes that violate the ethics in sports integrity never happened in their sport will never happen. And I think that was the biggest lesson that we've learned as a Maltese Olympic Committee, that of course first we must ascertain, we must ensure that the people we deal with day in, day out in our daily mission are primarily convinced themselves that this is important, that this should be given priority. And to be fair, a good number of the people who first had the idea of shunning the invitation, they did actually attend, and admittedly they came afterwards and said this was a great eye-opener. Because sometimes I do believe that when it comes to sports integrity, yes, it could be that people, and I hope that the majority have never been in such a situation or encountered such situations, but it doesn't mean, because it never happened, there won't be a first time. And yes, we need to be well equipped. You mentioned educational tools earlier on. We must ascertain that our administrators, our officials, our athletes, they are equipped with all the necessary tools. Today we have loads of verified and official online material, which is also very important, to make sure that when there is, I would dare describe it as a smell of, even the faintest smell of violation, then our administrators, our officials, our athletes know how to react and know what to do. So it's a matter that it's very important to be prepared. And in our opinion, if we fail to prepare our stakeholders, then you have to prepare to fail.
Antonio, Kevin, and Herman they represent the two biggest sports organizations in Malta. You come, to a certain extent, you come from a different organization, so you can maybe give a different perspective about the challenges.
Yes, definitely, and I'm conscious of time, but I'll try and give an international perspective to this. In my opinion, the biggest challenge is the inconsistency in terms of the approach towards combating match fixing across jurisdictions. Herman, rightfully so, before was praising Malta's system, Malta's laws, etc. And he should. But unfortunately, when it comes to that type of legislation, the anti-match fixing legislation, it's not the case in each and every jurisdiction. There's also the aspect from a betting perspective, like I said before. Well-regulated jurisdictions have in place the obligation to report suspicious betting. Certain jurisdictions actually take it a step further. For example, Brazil, some states in the USA, Ontario in Canada, for example. It's actually a legal obligation to be part of an international monitor, such as IBM, just to have that international and holistic focus of the difficulties within the sector when it comes to match fixing. Now, why is this important? It's important because let us remember, nowadays, when we say a fixed event, the perpetrator is not in a single location. In most cases, as my colleagues can confirm, you have an athlete who accepts the fix, who is based in one location, and potentially that is the location, which is not always the case, where the sport is actually being played, because even the contact between the fixer and the athlete may actually take place in a different location. The potential illegal betting operator facilitating that activity is in a different location. The fixer is in a different location. The media, which is usually used, which is through these apps, which obviously help to hide your identity, etc., is obviously has its servers, etc., in a separate place. And that is why then, when it comes to actually enforcing and investigating match fixing, it becomes a lot difficult. In fact, we have data which actually shows that in most cases, the event is fixed from a separate location. So there's a difference of location between the fixer and the sports event. So yeah, when it comes to enforcement, that makes it a lot difficult. In fact, it's a fact that, unfortunately, most enforcement comes from the sports directly, because it's easier for the sport to look at the betting data, etc., make their own assessment and sanction the athlete immediately, than for the law enforcement agency to try and liaise with all those different jurisdictions who treat match fixing differently and try to solve the crime at the end of the day. So yeah, in my opinion, the biggest challenge is indeed the inconsistency between jurisdictions. And it's something which we as IBA try to mitigate.
Thanks. As expected, we have exhausted our allocated time. I think we could go on for hours discussing this subject. I'd like to thank our expert guests, Herman, Kevin, and Antonio, for their insightful contribution to this discussion. I'll conclude with one final message, and it is where my sports media background kicks in. Sports is beautiful. Sports is about fair play, respect. So we're also duty-bound to tackle and fight in a robust manner anything that tarnishes the integrity of sport. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.